All right, everybody, welcome to today's episode on Fit as a Fiddle. We have the energy up today because we have a very special superstar guest. We have Tony Atkins. He is a pediatric neurosurgery physician's assistant at the Children's Hospital of Orange County, but he's actually a celebrity dancing doc. For anybody who doesn't know Tony already, you will see him on tons of different shows like Good Morning America, The Dr. Oz Show, ABC World News Tonight, Australian Morning Show, blah, 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 on and on and on. Basically every show, because Tony brings joy to the hospital environment. He is an incredible force of nature. I was just telling Tony offline, like, I know you really well because I stalk the crap out of you. So I feel like I know you already. But for anybody, who would love to check him out on Instagram and all the different things on social media, he's really a force of nature. And I'm so excited to have him on the show today because I think we've been trying to have you on the show for about a year now. So I think tonight's the night. We made it happen.
Exactly. My goodness, I've been waiting for this night. But it's a pleasure to be here today. I enjoy just talking about things that I love doing the most is taking care of kids, and their families, because it's pretty daunting to see a neurosurgeon in a pediatric realm. It's you can imagine you have a little kid and something goes wrong, and then you have to see a neurosurgeon out of all people in the hospital. And so it's a pretty daunting thing. And so I try my best to kind of, bring the information in a very, sensible way and let them know that I myself, as well as my team, are there for them at every step of the way.
Yes, and that definitely shows. Your empathy and the light that you bring in definitely shows in your work. So tell the listeners a little bit about why you chose this profession and what draws you to stay in it. I know it can be a very dark place and you bring the light into it, but how did you get into this and what inspires you to work in this field day in and day out?
Yeah, so my whole thing in undergrad was learning about the brain. So I always loved neuroscience. So that's when I got out of school, I really wanted to be in neuro. And so I got neuro surgery, and it was the most memorable experience within my rotations in University of Washington. And learned so much. There's so much about the brain that we don't really know, and there's a lot of areas we know if we take it out then some things don't work. So but there's a lot of pieces of the brain that we go through to do different types of surgeries, and we know it doesn't really affect people. And so what drew me to this point was the intricacy of the brain and the nerves and how sensory function and motor function. And if one thing is knocked out, then that muscle, as will start to atrophy. And so those things that kind of brought me there. And what brought me to pediatrics, because, when I was a little kid, I always wanted to be a pediatrician, and little kids, they always have four things that they want to be. They either want to be a police officer, a teacher, a pediatric, a physician, or firefighter. And so I always wanted to be in medicine, and I wanted to take care of kids. And so I just kind of married the two together. My passion for the brain and the nervous system, as well as taking care of kids and their families, is the number one priority.
That's amazing. So tell us a little bit about some of the diagnoses that you treat most commonly, the type of patients that you see coming in. I guess another question alongside that is, when it comes to anything neural, a lot of it is congenital, right? So a lot of this might start a lot earlier on, and patients might be coming in for care for a good majority of their youth and their young life. So I'd love for you to just touch on some of these diagnoses and, let the audience know a little bit about how your role in their care stays the same or shifts through the course of their time.
Yeah. So our number one thing that we see in pediatric neurosurgery is hydrocephalus. So it can be communicative hydrocephalus or obstructive hydrocephalus. And so we deal with these patients, little kids, from infancy. And so we utilize different type of devices called shunts, which divert the CSF from the brain, either to the abdominal cavity, to the heart, to the lung, the pleural cavity, as well as we deal with tumors. So brain tumors are pretty common in children. And so unfortunately, we see them, and sometimes they come in a train of three. So we see one day, and the next few days we may see another one, and in the next few days we may see another one. And so unfortunately, some of these tumors are pretty aggressive, and some of them are benign. And the other thing that we see is spina bifida, where we have these little kids that prenatally they're diagnosed by ultrasound, and we later work with neonatologists as far as when we're going to induce pregnancy. And what they do a cesarean section and then bring them over to our NICU, and then we're in the operating room within the first 8 to 24 hours after life. And so we have to kind of push, because everything is kind of the spina bifida kids, that all of their neural elements are born on the outside of their body. And so we have to kind of close things off and push everything back down so they don't get meningitis. Because that meningitis in little babies can be very devastating and cause severe neurological issues in the first month to 2 months of life. The other things that we see are traumatic brain injuries. In the summer months, it's a pretty hard thing, because a lot of kids like to be outside during the summer, as well as a lot of kids, unfortunately, on this side of the United States, sometimes it gets really hot. So we have a lot of kids that are on the second floor, and the parents put their beds next to open windows, and kids fall out of screens, the windows, and fall down to the second floor, or third floor, fourth floor. And so we have to deal with a lot of traumatic brain injuries. So, this profession could be very dark at times. And, the ICU sometimes have a train of neurosurgery kids. Right now, in the ICU, we have, in this part of the ICU, it's about 15 beds. But almost half of the kids are neurosurgical kids with various different acuities. So we have some that are not doing so great, and some that usually go home the next day after surgery, and those are usually the shunt kids. So it's some days or some weeks it can be very dark and gloomy, but every child in a room, you kind of try to compartmentalize that child in that room, because the next kid in the next room may be jumping off the bed and ready to go home. So then you have to, whatever's going on in that specific room next door to the other kid, you can't bring your feelings into the next room, or you won't be able to deliver excellent care. And so you have to learn very early on in your career how to kind of turn things off and turn things on for the next person, because what you're going through with the family and the kid in the room that's not doing so great, you can't bring that same mindset to the next room. And sometimes that's a thing that you have to learn by doing it over and over again, because it is something that's not taught in class.
I can also imagine that it requires an extreme amount of being present and mindful and being in the moment and understanding how to communicate using those soft skills to be able to provide empathy more when it's needed in certain situations, and navigating different, personalities, I'm sure too. So on that note, I'd love for you to tell us, and maybe there are people listening who can both, as from a clinician's perspective. So there's a lot of people who listen to the show who are within healthcare, they're healthcare providers, but a lot of people who are also clients, or other adjacent to the healthcare field. But either way, I'd love for you to tell us, with all this experience you have working with it's a dark space at times, like you mentioned, how do you communicate to the families, and what are some of the tips that you can give in ways that we can communicate with empathy when it's about the most important thing in your life, your child, right? For most people, that's just, it's their whole life. And so when there's something that can go wrong, I'm sure that there's a lot of emotions, and there's a lot of, there's a strategy is what I'm trying to look for. The word is strategy. And I'd love for you to describe a little bit of your strategy in all of that.
Yeah, so this is a good question. So the things that I do is, I really try to engage the parents during these tough times and let them know I understand. I have children of my own, so I kind of put myself in their shoes and want to know what would be the words that will comfort me if I was in their position. And that's the way that I kind of communicate and kind of bring my message to them. And I just don't do like a lot of practitioners just run into the room and drop a bomb and then take off. I kind of go in and do the full workup of, seeing how they are, checking the pulse of the room is a key thing that you need to learn early. If you're going to go in there, happy, or you're going to go in there just kind of calm, or you go in there kind of serious. So you have to check that very early. And once you get the pulse of the room, then you can kind of figure out how you're going to deliver your message. And the way you package your message means a lot, because a lot of parents, for myself, if somebody just came into the room, just dropped the bomb and says, your child has a brain tumor that is aggressive and they're not going to live, make sure you get his affairs in order, and then leave. That would be devastating to any parent. And it's happened before all across the country. I'm pretty sure it's happening every day. But for myself and the team that I work with, we have a strong understanding that we communicate and deliver the messages a certain way, just going through the MRIs or any of the CT scans, just going through those things and making sure they understand what they're looking at. And so we can kind of delineate and say, this is what this brain tumor is here. We know it's in a sensitive place, but we're going to do everything in our power to remove as much as we can so oncology can start their treatments. But we're going to be family for life, okay? And we're going to take care of you just like you're part of our family. And that's the message that I deliver every time I have a brain tumor child, because, I hate seeing kids, but I love to take care of them, because if I see them, then there's an issue. And so every new brain tumor I see, it rips my heart out, but I keep going because this is what I was granted from the man above. And so not everybody can do it, but I've been given that opportunity to do it. So I keep going, and every one that passes away, it takes a little bit away from me. And so I always get kind of teary eyes and that's how I feel right now, because I've had I've had a lot of, I call them my little girlfriends or my little buddies, over the years that, they touched me in every way imaginable, because I put myself in the parents' shoes, and I say, okay, this is my child, and I'm going to do everything imaginable to take care of it.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Tony.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting a little emotional too. Wow. I mean, it's so much. And I think that the first thing that comes to my mind is I'm so glad that you exist in this planet and that you're able to deliver this kind of care to these little kids who didn't deserve anything that has come to them. And I think there's a lot of people out there that kind of treat patients like robots, and it's just a mill. You just process and admit, discharge, right. Admit, discharge. And I think, I mean, as a healthcare provider myself, I've only worked in hospital systems for a few months. I was actually in a NICU and a PICU for a little while. But outside of that, I'm an outpatient. And even in outpatient, I can imagine there's so much chronic pain and there was so much emotion going on. And if you like amplify that times 3,000 for somebody whose life is just like in your hands and in the hands of your colleagues, and you guys are, instead of taking it as a negative thing, but being empowered, it sounds like you have a good community and you guys empower each other to really recharge one another and provide this excellent care. And that's such a gift to have, because I think that it's rare, Tony. I think that it is. I don't think that there's a lot of you out there. And that's why I was obsessed with having you on the show, because I'm like almost crying and I knew this would happen. But we're so happy. We're so happy to have people like you to inspire. And, you know, I know that the stardom and the, you know, all of the millions of views that you get on your Instagram it's not that one message of, oh, look, he dances well with this kid. It's actually a huge message. And I saw that the second that I saw you, the first video of yours a little over a year ago, almost 2 years ago now, I was like, this message is just so important for this world to see. It's this little spark that it's a little pebble in this ocean that ripples and creates this small sense of positivity and a small sense of happiness, that in a state of absolute despair, in a situation that otherwise would be horrible, and you can create something that can emote an opposite feeling in that room. And I think that power is incredible. And I hope that the heavens above blesses you to keep doing this for eternity if possible. And that you're able to
most definitely.
and that you're able to keep this up. I know that you will, for as long as you can. And so I'm so grateful to have you on the show today as well.
Thank you so much. It really means a lot, you know, because it's, you know, we don't, in healthcare, when you're dealing with, you know, a lot of, you know, things that happens within, you know, matter of seconds, there's no time to kind of reflect on the things that you just went through, because you've always got to keep going. And so the things that I kind of promote on social media it's to help everybody, not just my patients, but to help everybody all across the world, because, you know, the message is stating that, you know, you can do more as a healthcare provider if you just take your time and not look at a patient as a patient and a treatment and a diagnosis for that treatment. So it's, you know, we just need to take time sometimes. You know, it only takes a few minutes to a few seconds just to really dive into somebody's background and just say, you know, how are you doing and how are you feeling and what can I do to help you? It only just, you know, just making them laugh, making them feel like humans, you know, and not just somebody that comes into your office at 1:30 and you got to get them out of there within 15 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is really the error in the medical system are these time constraints and these kind of barriers that we have to maybe being able to express that. But I think as a healthcare provider, or as somebody who's patient facing or client facing to any capacity, and for that matter, I think that it's actually within you to be able, even within the time constraints that you have, to be able to deliver that quality care by, I mean, I just remember in PT school, there was one professor who was like, you know, every time you see a patient, pretend like it's your grandma, and like, what would you do then? Right. And so that actually stuck with me. And there's a lot of times where I'm going in to see a patient and I'm like, this person's going through a lot. Their behavior is there for a certain reason, because they're experiencing pain and they're experiencing quality of life problems that I cannot fully fathom. And I never will probably in that capacity, because their lived experience is so different than mine. And so how can, like you just said, how can you go in there and just say, I'm going to be here to help you because I know that that's my role here. That's why I chose to do this. I could leave if I wanted to, but while I'm here and I'm choosing to be here, how can you actually provide value to that person so that you can improve the quality of that moment? You don't need to improve the quality of their life, but how do you improve the quality of that interaction and that moment? And a lot of times that's just you listening, actually, right? I'm sure you hear this too. Sometimes you just have to shut your mouth and just listen to somebody, because that's all they wanted to do. And even if it sounds like it's whatever crazy to you, just having that moment to give to them and being okay with that, and then living with that, and then acknowledging it, and then moving on. And that can be like a huge, I've seen that so many times where, you know, I want to jump in and be like, oh, I'm going to problem solve. I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And I'm going to tell you this. And that's usually not what they need. They just usually just need to tell you what's going on with them. And you just say, and how can I help you with this? How can I make it easier for you?
Exactly. That's all it needs. Just takes your time. That's it.
Exactly. Well, is there anything else that you would, I feel like I want to talk to you for like a million years and your best friend, but how would you like to say anything else to our audience today to wrap up our conversation? Any advice or information?
Of course, you know, we always think of, because right now the burnout season is on the rise for everybody that has to take care of others. Either you are a grocery clerk, or you are a waiter. You know, everybody is getting burnt out. And so sometimes we have to kind of think back of what is the main reason that I chose this profession. And just kind of, you know, be calm with yourself, because sometimes we demand a lot of things from ourselves and we become unhappy in where we're at. And so, you know, with the residents that rotate throughout the hospital, you know, they page me all the time. And before they get to start talking about what they page me for, I pause and ask them, how are you doing today? You know, is everything going all right? Is you smiling today? And then they laugh, and I was like, oh man, thanks for just asking me, how am I doing? Because a lot of, you know, suicide prevention is helped by just asking people, how are you doing? And what can I do for you today? You know, those little simple words just to kind of stop people in their tracks, and kind of takes them back, and it's like, wow, this person really wants to know what I'm doing. They probably don't feel like it, but hey, they asked me something different. And so usually, you know, or majority of times we need to kind of slow down sometimes and just kind of think back, why did I get into this profession? And take a deep breath. And you need to take breaks. You know, you can't just work like crazy like I do, but my breaks are taking care of my kids. And so I live to take care of others, and that is my passion. And I love it. You can ask my wife, my kids. I love just taking care of kids, and that is where I'll end.
I love it so much. Well, thank you for taking time out of saving the children on this planet Earth to talk to our guests on Fit as a Fiddle. Audience, you've had a little treat today. I know I teared up a little, so I'm gonna go wash my face. But it was such an amazing conversation, and I hope that years down the line we'll have you back on the show, and you're not too much of a celebrity to not come back on Fit as a Fiddle.
No, I'll never be that way. I love just doing the things that I do. It's just a byproduct of, you know, other news organizations and things like that. See something different. And you know, I'm always in, you know, we go out in public and people recognize me, and I was like, hey, what's up? Thank you for recognizing me. And you know, and I love it, because you know, it's something positive that people appreciate and recognize you for, and I love it. So my wife always says, you're not Kim K, you better take out this trash.
I love it. I love it. Well, for listeners who haven't seen, who are maybe living under a rock and have yet to see Tony dancing with infants and little children in hospitals, absolutely the cutest thing ever. Can you give us your Instagram handle?
So it's T_Malone, MALONE, the number 3.
Amazing. I hope everybody follows, checks out the videos, and follow your work and your inspirational message as well. And thank you so much, Tony, for making time today.
It's more than a pleasure and an honor. Thank you so much.